In my last video, I talked about the 996 generation of the 911 Turbo and about how amazing of a car that is. In 2006, the 996 was replaced by the 997.1, and after a few years, there was a mid-cycle refresh to this, the 2010 Porsche 911 Turbo, the 997.2 generation. And there were some very important changes that took place with this new generation of the 911 that are crucial to Porsche's history. So in today's video, I want to take you through the exterior, interior, talk about the specs. We'll go for a real quick first impressions test drive to give you a picture of why I feel like this car is so important. And at the very end of the video, I'll tell you which of the CarCave crates I think it fits into. Start by talking about the exterior design on the 997.2. First off, front end, you have some more streamlined vents, I would say, on the front bumper of the car, as well as these fog lights that previously were not there. This specific car is finished in steel gray, looks fantastic, and actually, I think the 996 that I reviewed was also steel gray. Gone are the controversial headlights of the 996. In place are these much more popular, much easier to accept headlights of the 997. Moving along, this being a 911, obviously it's going to retain that very iconic side profile shape. We've got 19-inch wheels at the front, 19-inch wheels at the back. These are the optional RS Spider wheels with the center locking lug in place of standard lugs. And this being a turbo, you have the rear quarter panel vent that's going to provide that necessary cooling air to the rear engine. But where with the 996 it was one big gaping hole, with this car it actually has some added architecture to make two smaller holes. I would imagine that would increase the velocity of the air that's entering into the vent, which would in turn cool the engine more efficiently. And of course, just like the 996 generation, you have these rear bumper grills as well. Moving finally to the rear end, and this is probably my favorite part. I love the 997 generation of this car. I think it's one of the best looking, especially because of the taillights. I don't know what it is about them, but I really like them. Actually, if I turn them on, you'll kind of see what I mean. Look at that. It just looks sinister, especially with these wider rear fenders on the turbo. It just gives the car so much stand, so much presence, makes it quite intimidating to look at. Now, it does have a double layered construction for the rear wing, which is very interesting. Operates in much the same way as the 996 generation in that the bottom portion is fixed in place, and at certain speeds the top portion will extend to give you some added downforce. You can actually also deploy it with a button on the interior. We also have the functional rear exhaust pipes, which look very good. Overall, I'm very impressed with the look of this car. Even now, we're talking 13 years after its release, it still looks properly good. Onto the interior on this car, and it's quite familiar to me. I have a 987.2 Boxster, and a lot of the design is very similar. But something that I was not aware of was that you could actually get carbon fiber interior. I didn't know that until I actually sat in this car, which has plenty of carbon fiber. On your e-brake, you have it on your door handle as well, your gear selector, a bit on the dashboard. Compared to the 996 generation, which only had one cup holder, the 997 has two, and they're on the passenger side instead of on top of the central display. You also have Bluetooth, but it's only for your phone. You can't actually listen to music off of your phone. You can only take calls and that sort of thing. But this car actually has an auxiliary, a USB, and funnily enough, an iPod. I almost forgot what an iPod was. And so you can connect your phone there and listen to your music as well. All of that is great. And if you don't have that, it's got a CD player. You've got your heated seats. This specific car has the Sport Chrono package, the sports steering wheel with the actual paddles. Pretty important part of this car, it actually debuted Porsche's launch control system. Now, launch control is not that unusual in a Porsche today, but back in the day, there was no launch control. It started with this car. And that's very important because Porsche's launch control system has become one of the best launch controls you can buy, and it's very easy to use. Unlike other cars, which at the time were debuting their launch control systems, it was very complicated. There were plenty of switches. You had to get permission from the president before you could take off. All of that kind of stuff, not the case with the 911 Turbo. All you had to do was option out the Sport Chrono package. If you did, you'd hit your Sport Plus button, you'd push down on the brake hard as you can, smash the accelerator. It's going to hold your RPMs at 6,000, 6,500 RPMs. Release the brake. Your internal organs will reposition themselves as this car releases its insane amounts of power to launch you forward. So very simple system. Push a button, push both pedals, release the brake, and off you go. And that's really a great segue to talk about the insane performance that this car has to offer. The 997 generation goes way beyond any generation before it. And part of that has to do with technology like the VTG, variable turbine geometry. And this is a very clever system that Porsche developed with BorgWarner. Basically, they found a way to create a turbocharging system that has the benefits both of a smaller turbo and a larger turbo. Now, smaller turbochargers are great because they're smaller, so they're able to wind up much quicker, much more easy. And what that means is you have better throttle response as well as more low-end torque. The problem is, because they're smaller, you don't get as much air in there, and that means that at higher speeds, they struggle to continue to perform. That's where larger turbos come in. With larger turbos, you can have as much air as you want, and so in theory, you can have as much power as you want. But the problem with larger turbos is, being that they're larger, it takes a bit longer for them to spool up, and that's when you get things like lag. So with this VTG system, essentially what they've done is they've integrated things called guide vanes. And these vanes will articulate based on what the ECU on the car tells it, and that's going to give you a simulation of both different types of turbochargers. So at lower speeds, lower RPMs, those vanes are going to tilt inwards. It's going to make a smaller opening. It's going to increase the velocity of the air going into the turbocharger, spool it up very quick, and give you the same sort of responsiveness and low-end torque that you get from a smaller turbocharger. But as the boost pressure builds, those vanes are going to open up. And what that's going to do is force more air into the turbocharger. And all of a sudden, you have a larger turbocharger so that you have more power. All of that combined with the fact that the displacement was increased from 3.6 liters to 3.8 liters means that this car can produce 500 brake horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. Drive goes to all four wheels, and you still have two transmission choices. And that's very important because you can get a 6-speed manual on a 997.2 911 turbo. But for the generation that replaced it, the 991.1, there's no longer a manual option. The only option you have is a 7-speed PDK. Again, very important point, because this is the first 911 turbo to offer the 7-speed double clutch transmission, the PDK system that Porsche is famous for. There's no more Tiptronic S. The result? It has a top speed of, I think, 193 miles per hour, and it does 0 to 60 back in 2010 in 3.2 seconds. That is extremely fast. In fact, it's just as fast as a Lamborghini Murcielago SV. And let's not forget that that car costs almost 3 times as much as this, has 150 horsepower more, and twice as many cylinders. And I mentioned price. The base MSRP of this car when it came out in 2010 was $138,000. I went on Car Gurus, found all of the 997.2s that were for sale, averaged out their pricing, and the average listing price of this car today is around $105,000. That Murcielago SV that I mentioned just a moment ago, those are going for over $1 million. So when you consider the price point, this is a very attractive option. And if you want to get this level of performance in a modern 911, you'd have to opt in for something like a 911 GTS. And that has a starting MSRP of $150,000. So this is $50,000 cheaper than a modern 911 and can perform at the same level. So you really start to understand how incredible this car is. But what I want to do right now is I want to take it out for a first impressions test drive because I've actually never driven a 997.2 turbo, so I'm very excited to see what it's like. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the car into Sport Plus mode. That actually also changes the exhaust note, which is pretty cool. You hear the turbo spool and they sound pretty awesome, honestly. It kind of has like a whooshing noise. Yeah, the response is actually really good. There's not really much lag at all. As soon as you push down on the accelerator, you just feel that surge of torque, and I'm almost positive that that has a lot to do with that VTG system, because this car is quite a bit faster than the outgoing 996 generation. A bit more noise in this cabin than, again, a modern 911, but that's part of the quality of this car. You're buying this car because you want that more aggressive, raw response from your sports car. You don't want it to feel numb. You want to feel everything, and you do in this car. The trade-off to that is it maybe is a little bit less comfortable to some people, but again, you want that if you're going for a car like this. The throttle response in this car is impressive. I don't really get the sensation of any lag, and with the car set up in Sport Plus mode, it really just waits till the very last minute. Oh my God. Yeah, no, this car is seriously quick. Like, even by modern standards. I've driven the 996 generation of this car, and I've driven the 992, the current generation 911 Turbo S. That car is insane, and I did a video on both of those, so I'll leave those links if you want to check them out. But this car feels very, very fast. Definitely faster than the 996, no surprise there, but on normal public roads, my God, those turbos just, there's a certain point in the rev range where you feel the boost pressure just explode, and it's violent. It's violently fast, this car. And again, for the price point, good luck finding something that's going to be able to compete with this. You're just not going to be able to. Last but not least, the CarCave crates. It's kind of my way of summarizing my final thoughts on a car, whether it's collectible, daily drivable, something that you could take to the track, or something that you should avoid entirely. With this car, collectability, I don't think there's going to be any debate here. I think it's very collectible. Last 911 Turbo to offer a manual, first 911 Turbo to have the double clutch PDK system that Porsche is really very famous for, as well as the first car ever to offer their launch control system. All of these are very important innovations that Porsche started all with this car. And if you want that proper mechanical driving feedback, in my opinion, the 997.2 and the 987.2 for the Boxster and Cayman are really the last generations of Porsche that are going to offer that. And that's not Porsche's fault. That's just the nature of technology and the nature of moving forward in the industry. Things have to move more in the electronic era. And I feel like the 997, the 987 are really the transition generation. It's taking all of the best from the mechanical era and all of the best of the era that we're moving towards, putting it in one car before we lose that mechanical sensation. So for that reason, I think this car is very collectible, and in fact, they're quite rare. I don't see too many of these go on sale, especially not as clean as this one. I did some looking. I don't know if it's only for the US or if it's worldwide, but for 2010, there were only 2,113 of these cars sold, and that's a really low number. But it is quite understandable when you consider that that was really around the time of the recession and not a lot of people had a bunch of disposable income. Daily drivability and trackability, I've talked about it in a lot of other videos with the 986, for the Turbo, for the Carrera, really any 911. They're great for daily driving, they're fantastic on track, so there's really no questions there. And the only reason you should avoid this car is for financial reasons. If you can afford it, I think it's a great car to have in your collection, or if you just want an amazing sports car for the money, this is a great option. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Huge thank you to Porsche of Ontario. They're always so generous in loaning me cars so that I could do videos for you guys. This specific car is available for sale. So if you're looking for a 997.2, this is a great example. I'll leave links to their website, their social media, and the posting for this car if you want to go ahead and check them out. Otherwise, leave me a comment with your thoughts on the 997.2 Turbo, and let us know what's your favorite generation of the 911 and why. Otherwise, leave me a like and subscribe, show your support for the channel, hit the bell icon so that you don't miss a post. But until the next video, thanks again for watching and take care.